Let's talk to Anne Gearan from the Washington Post and Asra Nomani, who has written for outlets such as Breitbart and The Hill. They're both in Washington tonight. Asra, I'll start with you, just to clear up some confusion. I'll mash up a famous quote about the news being something that, well, somebody somewhere doesn't want the people to see. Everything else is PR. When Donald Trump talks about fake news and talks about the crooked media, he's talking about everything that isn't PR, isn't he?
Well, just as a correction, I haven't written for Breitbart. I worked for 15 years at the Wall Street Journal and now write freelance for a number of publications.
My apologies.
That's all right. And I have to make that correction only because what I fundamentally see happening in our press in the United States and in our discourse about so much related to the Trump administration is the vilification of both the Trump administration and anybody who might say that there's any rational discourse to be had about the administration and its policies. That's what really concerns me as a journalist.
What do you mean by vilification? I think I've lost my other guest, so this could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
All right, great.
What do you mean precisely by vilification?
Well, I'll just give you a few examples. For example, 40 years ago, as you know, I mean, you're an old school journalist, I know, and 40 years ago, Carl Bernstein at the Washington Post, treaded this new ground of investigative journalism. And just to show how far we have fallen, this last week, Carl Bernstein's son, now a reporter at the New York Times, was busted for calling Melania Trump a hooker. He came out, he owned up to it, and he apologized.
Well, yes,
but that's just...
I'm going to insist that you tell me how Donald Trump is being vilified. And the younger Bernstein actually wasn't busted. He came forward after an anonymous journalist was identified, and in a fashion that many would say was emblematic of honest media, said that was actually me, and I apologise profusely and completely for it. So just in terms of Donald Trump being vilified by established media, can you give me some examples?
Right, so that example is, the Trump family being vilified by default through the wife, and then we have the media.
But that was a private conversation that wasn't reported anywhere. I'm interested in how journalism has vilified the president.
But you know as well as I do that we have a sacred duty as journalists not to have malice and not to have this type of, rabid hatred that I do see expressed.
So in terms of published journalism, where is the vilification?
Let's talk about it.
Yes.
So, for example, the Washington Post just a couple weeks ago wrote a piece of a feature piece in which they said that Donald Trump was an ignoramus.
An ignoramus?
We have, yeah. Okay. So this is not the kind of language that we expect from the media. And what we have today is Kurt Eichenwald, for example, a columnist for the New York Times, putting forward a hashtag of Flynn Ghazi, trying to kind of conflate the Mike Flynn controversy with the Benghazi controversy, arguing for new hearings, which you can justifiably argue. But the media has, unfortunately, from the social media, which is very important, from Facebook and Twitter, to the traditional legacy media, engaged and participated in this thing that I consider a hashtag intifada that is happening in America. A Washington Post, let me just, one other little...
called an ignoramus, has he? He's complained about reports regarding his executive order being turned over by 2 courts. He's complained about reports that have led his national security advisor appointee to have to resign, and he's no doubt poised to complain about reports that define why he couldn't get his Labour secretary pick through a Congress he controls. I appreciate being called an ignoramus is unpleasant. It pales into insignificance when you look at some of the names that Donald Trump levelled at Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. So just for the final time, the published vilification of Donald Trump's presidency, where is the dishonesty? Ignoramus is just name-calling.
But what I find so interesting, and even just your response, is everything that I present as, substandard behavior by our media profession, you discount as irrelevant. And
no, but it's not published vilification, madam.
Ultimately,
you got called an ignoramus.
Ultimately, sir, what it reflects is a bias that is turning a lot of people off. Like you can deflect from it at every turn, every example that I present. But what I'm telling you is that there is a constituency in America that is very turned off to it, and they're going to go into hiding like they did with the election. but they will come back for the votes in 2018 and 2020, and it would behoove us as journalists to actually pay attention to those that are very turned off right now by the bias that is existing in the media today.